So thanks for the introduction. I'm going to take about 15, 20 minutes just to really talk about something that's very dear to my heart, which is really around future fitness. And how does your business remain relevant in a world which is changing faster and faster? And within that context, how do you as an individual with a career and a set of aspirations remain relevant to the economy and your business around us? And it's a very interesting conversation that you start to have around digital natives, which Bronwyn picked up, and digital immigrants. Now, I look around this room tonight, and with the greatest of respect, the majority of us are definitely digital immigrants. We've come into this digital world right late. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, my youngest son, who's now about 7, he was about 2, and he walked up to the solid-state television in the room, and without thinking, started to try and move the screen across from one side to the other. Now, it never occurred to me to do that. But for a 2-year-old who had only ever grown up with an iPhone and an iPad and a touch screen, you suddenly began to understand what digital native meant. So the majority of us in this room are digital immigrants trying to live in a digital world. And we live in a world now where the largest purveyor of video-based content and movies owns no physical screening asset. We live in a world where the large transporter of people own no vehicles. We live in a world where the largest retail rental company, which is Airbnb referenced earlier, owns no physical property. We live in a world where the largest carrier of telephone voice calls doesn't own any telephony infrastructure. Those are all digital native companies. And within that, you need digital native individuals to be future fit, to have a chance of surviving. The digital immigrants, the companies coming late to the digital party, with a heritage that stretches back many, many years, are really, really struggling. And they're struggling because of their search for relevance to the consumer. If you take the example of Ford that I used to work for 27, 28 years ago, when I joined them, it was the world's 3rd largest company. The world's 2nd largest company was General Motors, and the world's largest company was General Electric, also on this slide. They barely make the top 100 in the world anymore. The average lifespan in the Forbes 100 index at the moment is less than 10 years, because companies can't keep pace with the relevance of their product sets for the consumers' needs of tomorrow. And I finally put ABSA on there, and I put the old ABSA logo on there because I really can't stand the new one, which looks like an advert for condoms. Really to make the point that locally, just think about a big bank locally right now having to cope with the likes of WeChat and their financial applications that sit inside it. And believe you me, WhatsApp is not far away in terms of that seamless ability to stay in a single app. So the digital immigrants, the majority of us, are now wrestling with digital natives like the Netflix, the Ubers, and the Airbnbs, and it's a wholly unequal, mismatched fight. So what are we going to do to at least stand a chance of survival? So you've got to ask yourself the question, what is it that keeps you relevant? So if we take a great big brand that only 10, 12 years ago thought it dominated the world of mobile telephony. 1 in 2 handsets in the world in 2006 was a Nokia handset. 1 in 2 around the world. 2006, only 12 years ago. What they failed to understand was that predicating the business on the relevance of somebody doing something as old-fashioned as talking to somebody else on the telephone wasn't going to be relevant in 2018. What do we now do with our phone? Our phone is a connection to the internet to allow us to do a whole range of things. Another guy, Steve Jobs, understood that, right? And with that great leap of relevance, of importance to you as an end consumer, what you could do with that gadget, the world of SMS and making telephone calls, and some slightly dodgy graphics and a little snake that used to run around that you could catch, right, began to disappear. Because they didn't understand, and in a phenomenally irrelevant way, but compounded by my second lesson tonight, really, which is around arrogance. The arrogance of Nokia and the arrogance of some other competitors in the face of this thing called the iPhone in the mid-2000s, when you look back at it with, quite happily admit, the benefit of significant hindsight, was quite remarkable. But the dismissive nature of people like Palm, do you remember Palm? Where are Palm today? They don't exist anymore. Made some of those early personal digital assistants because they thought that for a while it was relevant for you to be able to do emails on the train going home so you could plug your device back in when you got home to synchronize. That's what they built the PDA around. Around, as I said earlier, some of the words that Nokia used. And then the Nokia CEO stands up when they went bust 3 or 4 years ago and says, straight face. Do you remember what he said? We didn't do anything wrong. Yes, you did. You didn't listen to your customer. You didn't invest the time and energy to remain relevant. And you let your own arrogance and predominance in that sector create a lens that didn't allow you to react to the imminent threat of immediate connectivity in your hand instead of the ability to make a telephone call. So the arrogance compounded with the lack of understanding what the consumer could have rather than what you wanted to sell them becomes fascinating. Now, many of you in this room will know the story of a software engineer and developer called Brian Acton. Had a very good career at Yahoo. Yahoo became irrelevant in the face of the Google onslaught because it didn't understand that people went to Google to search for stuff. But what Google was trying to do on its interface was give you information anyway, what the weather was going to do, what was happening, and all that sort of stuff. You were cluttering up something already complicated. Yahoo began to dwindle and die in the mid to late 2000s. Google began to ascend. A great software developer and engineer called Brian Acton decided it was time for him to leave Yahoo and go do something different. So first he tried to go and join Twitter. Now there is, of course, a delicious irony to this first quote, that you post on Twitter, you didn't get a job in Twitter, right? He said, okay, I didn't quite make it. I'm going to go and see my mate. I've heard him talk a couple of times. We've got a few friends in common, Mr. Zuckerberg. I'll go and have a chat and see whether I can get a job at Facebook. And he went to see Zuckerberg himself and a few others. And they said, you know what, your face doesn't just fit here. So I said, you know what? I think I have a different way of making a lot of other stuff irrelevant. And he created, of course, WhatsApp. Now, the point around WhatsApp is that the theory that sat behind it was that you didn't want to worry about the carrier that took your telephone call. You didn't want to worry about multiple things that you had to do to make a telephone call to send a message. And as we get more and more immersive in WhatsApp, then you're never going to leave it until 3 years' time as they develop more and more functionality. That's the point. They're disintermediating your bank. They're disintermediating a whole host of things. Just think about the stuff that we used to use only 4 or 5 years ago. We used to have paper-based class lists. Anybody here have children? Could you run a school event? Could you organize anything in the classroom without WhatsApp anymore? Yeah? Could you even organize a frigging party at home without a WhatsApp group? Hey? It has completely disintermediated email. It has taken away the need to use SMSs. Viber, and you can love Viber because Viber was a big trendy product, right? Still going, but just look for a moment at their tagline, connect.freely. Gosh, wow, how exciting is that? And then the telco operators, totally irrelevant in your life now. The more and more that you use the Wi-Fi that can be connected, who really cares what the provision is behind the scenes? So you've got massive expense going into telco infrastructure for which WhatsApp doesn't pay. Has anybody here ever tried to phone the WhatsApp helpline? There isn't one, right? Why? Because they don't care whether it works or not. You're still going to try and use it. But when something does go down at home, you try and phone Telcom or Vodacom, right? Nothing to do with them. The fact the server's gone down in California. The irrelevance that WhatsApp is creating to the infrastructure around you right now is only just being felt. And I suspect the arrogance of 1 or 2 large firms that are ignoring that will be felt very hard and very quickly in the next 2 to 3 years. And just like Bronwyn says, I really include in that the banks in a really big way. I think the disintermediation of existing traditional transactions through WhatsApp is going to be enormous. And that's why you see the phenomenal investment at the moment in the Chinese WeChat solutions and everything else. They understand the need to be continually looking for relevance without being arrogant about what the customer may need. Now, the businesses that you work in, most of you, just looking around the room carefully, broadly look well enough dressed to assume that you've got a salary, okay? So you work for a business, right? What is it that your business does right now, today, to think about its relevance to the consumer? What is it doing right now, today, to remain future fit? Because if it doesn't, its ability to pay you, the employee, a salary diminishes over time. So you should care about this, because an irrelevant business very quickly becomes a redundant business. So be thoughtful about the things that you have, both at a company level and at an individual level, that keep things relevant. And if you get down to those last couple, experience and price, you are in the shit. Because you can trade off experience for a wee while, but it broadly creates even further irrelevance. And you can trade on price for even less time, but then you just become taken by the market as the price goes down because you've got no new value add, no new relevance that's going to allow you to haul yourself back up. So what is it that you in your career are doing right now to keep yourself relevant? Tale of two brothers. Randall Stevenson. Anybody know who Randall Stevenson is? A few hands, yep. And his brother, Kevin. Kevin actually is the older of the two. Randall Stevenson is the CEO and, in true American style, the chairman of AT&T, one of the world's largest telcos. His brother, Kevin, who actually helped get him into AT&T 30 years ago, is a copper engineer, an engineer that keeps the copper line still going, which most people in telco today would say is a broadly irrelevant technology. And these two quotes came from a New York Times article a year or so ago, where Randall is trying to push through an enormous change to keep his workforce relevant and continually learning about what new skills they need to have a future in his workforce tomorrow. And his brother just says, you know what, mate? I really ain't interested. I'm riding the copper train all the way down. I'm riding the copper train all the way down. Great way to put it. That's his brother, right? He doesn't care. He doesn't want to be relevant. You know what? He's going to get a salary for another 2 or 3 years. Then he's going to retire. His brother makes $50, $60 million a year. He's going to be okay, right? But he's not caring about his relevance, and that's a conscious decision. But if you don't care about it unconsciously, then you're not going to be future fit. And I think that's the critical point around how we as individuals adapt to this fast-moving world around us. And what's fascinating with this tale of two brothers, and I told it on Friday to a much bigger group than this, I did an address to 400 data scientist intake students. They're all about 21, 22. They've just started in their first couple of weeks in the country's largest data science academy down in Cape Town. And they're really excited. Do you remember what you used to be like when you were 21, 22 and you're really excited about something? And you just want to give them a cuddle, right? I mean, it's lovely, you know. God bless them. So I was trying to just give them a little bit of worldly wise advice about careers and sorting your shit out and that kind of stuff. And they're really excited, and they're right to be excited because they think they are the new rock and roll stars. They are working in data science, which right now is probably just about the trendiest field to go and study in and make a shed load of money. They're really excited. But I got news for those kids. I've got really important news for those kids around the relevance of those skills as the technology builds over time, and it will build very quickly. The AI capabilities, the self-coding capabilities, the self-analytic capabilities that will be coming just now. Machine-led data analytics, just like machine-led coding will be here just now. Maybe not now, but just now. And 400 kids who are only 21, 22, by the time they turn 41, 42, will not be relevant unless they've done something else with their lives and learnt some new skills or thought differently about the role they're going to perform in the economy. So even 21, 22-year-olds who are broadly digital native, who are broadly in the top right-hand corner of the most trendy profession right now, I would argue have a problem with future fitness unless they're conscious and thoughtful around it. And you've got to ask yourselves, particularly if you take that lens of arrogance that the Nokia guys had, if you become irrelevant, what happens? And you don't need any more examples than these. Brands like the South African Post Office. Do you remember the post office? You used to go there to get your post and parcels. Now you go there once a year, if you're very well behaved, to do your vehicle license disc. Yep. It's the only reason for the post office. No matter how many times my mate Mark Barnes says it's really relevant, bullshit. There's no point to the post office. It's become irrelevant in your life. It's been disintermediated by a host of other opportunities that people like Takealot and courier companies and email and so on has taken over. So there are lots of local and lots of global examples of what happens when you become irrelevant. You've got to remain future fit. You've got to really understand consciously what your organization is doing to stay relevant and what you are going to do to stay relevant. Otherwise, this happens to you. Data scientist, accountant, procurement person, sales guy. If your skills are not relevant, if your investment in what you're doing is not relevant, then I don't believe you have a future. So I guess just to close down, my view is that right now, and to slightly misquote LP Hartley, the past is a foreign country. We've been it, you've done it. But it's not the country you're going to live in the future. The past is a foreign country. And I don't believe you have a career future unless you're prepared to do some things very differently. You have got to actually listen to what customers need and want. Need and want, as my wife loves to explain to me frequently, are not the same things, broadly when it comes to handbags and shoes, right? Need and want are not the same things. Steve Jobs was particularly strong around it, saying, you know what, the customers don't know what they want, but I know what they need. But you've got to take a stance around that and listen to the voice of the customer, because the customer pays your salary. It runs your business. And you've got to be humble enough to listen actively and repeatedly to what they are saying so you can do something with it, rather than just assume, like Nokia did, that you know better. And you've got to confront the reality of your personal potential irrelevance to your business at a point in time. Whether you're Randall Stevenson or a 21-year-old data scientist, there's going to come a point in your life when you become irrelevant to your business and potentially to the economy unless you make conscious decisions around that. So grasping hold and understanding that reality is absolutely essential. And you've got to commit yourself to that change, and your organization needs to commit itself to the change. A half-hearted attempt, and we saw some examples on that slide, GE probably the best example, a half-hearted attempt by a digital immigrant to digitally reinvent itself just ends up in spectacular implosion and failure, and a tailspin that I very much doubt they will ever recover from. But having said all that, and it's a big personal journey, it's a big journey for your organizations, you also just remember, just live a little. Live in the moment, listen to what Bronwyn has said around the amazing, incredible things that are going on, but be cautious around that control. But live in the moment. The past is a foreign country, and stay, please stay, future fit. Thank you.